Hi everyone, welcome to Kimble Bay Church's vlog again today. Today we're going to be looking at a character in the Bible called Elisha. Elisha was a prophet of God, and he was a prophet that God really used. God's hand was definitely upon his life. Now you can read Elisha's story in 1 Kings and 2 Kings. But Elisha is first called for God by Elijah in 1 Kings 19 verses 19 to 21. Elisha wants to follow Elijah and to be his assistant, his disciple. So Elisha cuts off all ties to his current life. And he does this by kissing his parents, which was symbolic of showing that he was leaving them. And then he sacrifices his oxen. Now his oxen were his livelihood, and so by sacrificing them, by burning them, then that was showing that he's cut all ties with his former life and he's now ready to serve God. Elisha follows Elijah until his death and then continues to live his life for God. Just before Elijah's death, he asked Elisha what it is that he wants. And Elisha responds and says that he wants a double portion of Elijah's spirit to be upon him. Elijah responds saying that's a hard thing that he's asked for, but says, if you see me being taken up into heaven, then it shall be. And then as you read on in that passage, it says that they are walking and talking, just walking along together, and Elijah is taken up into heaven on chariots of fire like a whirlwind. Elisha was a humble man, and we can see how he blessed those that he was with. There's a story about the widow who was able to provide for herself and her children, who, after speaking to Elisha, and Elisha said to take all the jars that she had and to pour oil into them, and the oil didn't stop until all the jars were full. And so she was able to provide for herself and her children. Another time we read that Elisha, he repeatedly stayed with a husband and wife, and he would always stay with them whenever he was in the area. And they loved having him stay so much that they built an extension on their house. They built an extra room for Elisha to stay in. As a thank you, Elisha asks what he can do for them, and their heart's desire was to have a son. And so Elisha blesses them, and God gives them a son. There's an incident where Elisha is walking somewhere, and some young people see him and they call him Baldy. Now we read that Elisha then calls down a curse from God upon them, and bears attack them, and 42 of them in total are killed. The writer in the book that we're using, he asks the question, did Elisha have a short fuse? Was he insecure about his boldness? Well, he suggests not, and that it's more about the fact that Elisha was a prophet. He was a man used by God, and that was a role that commanded respect. People who respected Elisha's role, for example, the widow and the couple that he stayed with, they were blessed by God. But those who disrespected him were dealt with by God. So what can we learn from Elisha? Well, Elisha was a man who enjoyed a close relationship with God. He spent his life serving God and following him. And as Christians, we enjoy that same relationship with God. As we honour God, he then honours us. Elisha was a man who chased after God. He recognised straight away that a life with God was a life that was worth living. And he cut ties off with his old life straight away. And this reminded me of when we read in the New Testament Jesus calling his disciples. They immediately left their boats, their livelihoods, and instead chose to follow Jesus. We as Christians, we once made that same decision to cut off our old way, our old selves, and to instead lead a life following Jesus. So what about you today? Have you made that decision to follow Jesus? Do you maybe know someone who is a Christian and you've seen the difference that Jesus has made in their lives? Well, God can make that same difference in your life today. You just need to make the decision to follow him. Let me encourage you today to make that decision, to cut off your old life, cut off the ways that aren't God's ways, and choose instead to chase after God. Should we just pray together just to close the vlog today? Lord, we thank you today that we can enjoy a relationship with you. We thank you today for that time when we decided to cut ourselves off from our old life and instead chose to follow you. Thank you that we now enjoy a relationship with you day by day. And I just pray for those today who don't know you, who have never made the decision to follow you. I pray that as they see the difference that you've made in our lives, that they would choose to follow you. Amen.